Now, for the investment portfolio manager losing sleep at night. At Sky Acquisitions, we understand your pain points, but fear not, we have the solution. Institutional capital is missing the government infrastructure opportunity. And when we say institutional capital, we are talking about institutional level investment organizations, such as family offices, private equity firms, hedge fund managers, banks, CDFIs, accredited investors, real estate funds, and institutional capital partners. So, if your mandate includes capital preservation, durable cash flow, downside protection, portfolio diversification, real asset exposure, or risk-adjusted long-term returns, this episode is specifically for you. Because institutional level capital should be working with professionals who possess institutional level knowledge and experience. Not another person who just knows how to find a government solicitation on sam.gov. That's inconsequential at this level. You need people who understand the policy and regulatory architecture that shapes how government agencies define their needs, conduct market research, evaluate available solutions, select private sector partners, how they award contracts, how they administer performance, and protect public funds. See, this is the same level of institutional expertise that knows how to create contracting opportunities that are not even advertised on sam.gov or any of the other local or state procurement portals. That is institutional to institutional alignment, and that alignment matters because as an institutional level capital organization, your return does not come from attaching the word government to an investment. Your return comes from a properly structured transaction that connects capital, assets, qualified operators, regulatory compliance, government requirements, and an executable source of revenue. Now, statutory missions, appropriated funding, essential public requirements, and properly structured contract vehicles can create durable demand and contract-supported revenue opportunities. That is where institutional knowledge becomes invaluable. So if you control institutional capital, you should be working with people who understand the institutional systems through which government money must move by law. And this is what we do. I am Derek Green, a former federal acquisitions planner, proud Army veteran, procurement executive, and contracting official. And today, I want to explain how institutional capital can be aligned with one of the largest and most durable asset classes in the world, infrastructure. The most consistent asset in history today and as long as society needs to function. Infrastructure comes with guaranteed ROI that will always remain in place. Why? Because infrastructure is where government money is required to flow by law by millions and billions daily. Now, when I say infrastructure, I am not talking only about roads and bridges. Infrastructure is everything society needs to function. Water systems, electricity, emergency services, healthcare facilities, transportation, housing, office buildings, commercial facilities, military installations, and disaster response capacity. Government is the collection of federal, state, and municipal bodies responsible for managing, funding, regulating, overseeing, and acquiring the resources necessary to support those various sectors of infrastructure we just mentioned. But government does not deliver all of that capacity by themselves. It partners with private companies, private owners, developers, operators, inventors, financial institutions, and capital providers, the family offices, hedge funds, private equity firms. And this is where institutional capital holds an enormous advantage. Many government vendors understand their industry. They understand construction, housing, technology, logistics, healthcare. We can go on, facilities management. But what many of them do not possess is sufficient capital or acquisition capacity, real estate control, liquidity, bonding strength, and the ability to scale. Well, guess what? Institutional capital already possesses all of those resources. The question is whether those resources are properly aligned with government requirements. That is why capital providers need institutional level partners who understand how the government plans, funds, procures, and administers infrastructure solutions. You bring the capital advantage. We bring the institutional knowledge necessary to help position that advantage inside the government infrastructure ecosystem, institutional to institutional. Our expertise has included connecting capital providers, commercial real estate, qualified operators, and government requirements. That includes GSA, also known as the General Services Administration, through their leasing opportunities, connecting privately owned buildings with federal occupancy in North Texas, Dallas, Wichita Falls. It included construction projects here in Houston involving both city and federal contracting opportunities. It also included buildings aligned with the Department of Veterans Affairs as they expand their suburban clinics, the Department of Defense, United States Department of Agriculture, and NASA across Texas, Louisiana, and Washington, D.C. That's just a little bit of what we've done on both sides of the coin. It also includes large veteran housing communities created by repurposing apartment communities and hotels. So, this is not a theoretical discussion. We understand how capital, property, policy, operating capacity, and government missions must be brought together. The capital may already exist. The property may already exist. The government requirement may already exist, and the operator may already exist. What is frequently missing is the institutional knowledge required to connect those components in a compliant way through an executable acquisition strategy. That is the gap that we help you close. Government real estate also presents a characteristic that institutional investors understand. Long-term occupancy. When a government agency finds a facility that meets its mission, location, security, accessibility, and operational requirements, and it has a strong relationship with a capable property partner, it can remain in that location for many years, typically up to 28 years. Government tenancies can extend across long lease terms, renewal periods, follow-on procurements, and continued occupancy. Some government occupants remain in the same buildings for decades. Why? Because relocating an agency can be expensive and operationally disruptive. It may involve construction, specialized build-outs, security requirements, technology installation, furniture and equipment, employee relocation, public accessibility, and interruption to the agency's mission, which disrupts American society. That gives a well-positioned property owner an opportunity to provide something the government values tremendously: continuity. And who is better positioned to provide high-quality buildings than capital improvements, construction capacity, security upgrades, accessibility modifications, and operational stability than well-capitalized institutions. This is where your financial capacity becomes more than money. It becomes a competitive advantage. The policy framework is not there merely to create obstacles. It gives sophisticated capital providers greater visibility into how opportunities are planned and evaluated at the federal level. One of the primary acquisition frameworks is the Federal Acquisition Regulation, commonly known as the FAR. The Federal Acquisition Regulation governs how executive agencies plan acquisitions, evaluate private sector solutions, award contracts, administer performance, and apply quality controls. Within that framework, for example, FAR Part 7 addresses acquisition planning. That helps us understand how government intends to satisfy a requirement. FAR Part 10 addresses market research. That creates an opportunity for capable private sector participants to demonstrate what assets, services, and solutions the marketplace can provide. FAR Part 15 addresses proposal evaluation and source selection. That helps us position the complete solution around the government's actual evaluation criteria. FAR Part 42 addresses contract administration. That supports long-term performance, payment administration, oversight, and continuity after award. And FAR Part 46 addresses quality assurance. This is especially important to institutional capital because it connects government requirements with inspection, acceptance, performance standards, and accountability. Another important framework is the Code of Federal Regulations, commonly known as the CFR. The Code of Federal Regulations is the organized collection of general and permanent regulations issued by federal agencies. For example, Title 41 of the CFR addresses areas of public contracts and federal property management, including the government's use and acquisition of real property. Title 38 of the CFR contains regulations connected to the Department of Veterans Affairs, including veteran support and housing programs. These frameworks help us understand how the government requirements must operate, what quality controls apply, and how private capacity can be positioned to support the mission. For institutional investors, that knowledge strengthens due diligence. It informs asset selection. It improves transaction design. It supports quality control, and it helps capital move with greater strategic precision. For now, our primary focus is the commercial real estate angle. That includes office buildings leased to government agencies, hotels and apartment communities repositioned for veteran housing, healthcare and administrative facilities, emergency response locations, warehouses, specialized buildings, and underperforming real estate assets that may be repositioned to support continuing government missions. Consider veteran housing, for example. The requirement extends far beyond placing someone inside of an available room. A complete veteran housing community might require real estate acquisition capital, rehabilitation, accessibility improvements, transportation, healthcare coordination, security, facilities management, supportive services, and qualified operators. And that is an infrastructure ecosystem. Now consider federal office leasing. Government agencies require offices, clinics, service centers, warehouses. And by the way, whatever money you spend for build out, the government reimburses you with interest. But think about specialized buildings throughout the country. Institutional capital can provide the property, the acquisition capacity, the improvements, the stability, and the long-term resources necessary to support those requirements and get things up and running. But capital alone, however, is not the strategy. Institutional capital becomes considerably more powerful when paired with people who understand the mission, people with insider institutional level knowledge, procurement pathways, policy environment, operating requirements, and government decision-making process. That's what we do at Sky Acquisitions and GovCon Empire. We help create that alignment. We understand institutional capital. We help institutional capital understand where its resources may intersect with government infrastructure requirements. We evaluate the acquisition environment, and we identify relevant policy and regulatory frameworks. We connect capital with commercial real estate, qualified operators, government missions, and procurement strategy, and help transform available capacity into executable government-aligned opportunities. Of course, every institutional relationship must ultimately address the complete investment structure. That includes target returns and distribution structure, capital stack, hold the period, and exit options, property level underwriting, pipeline and deployment schedule, governance and reporting, operator selection, scenario and sensitivity analysis, portfolio scalability, and sponsor and investor alignment. Those are transaction-specific matters, and rather than attempting to compress that level of diligence into one introductory video, we can take a much deeper dive into those areas during live joint venture meeting consultations with qualified institutional capital partners. If you represent a family office, private equity firm, hedge fund, bank, CDFI, real estate fund, or another institutional capital organization, the question is not simply, where can we invest? The stronger question is, where can our capital advantage solve an essential infrastructure problem? Where does your capital intersect with a continuing government requirement? Which assets can be repositioned? Which operators can execute? And who possesses the institutional knowledge to bring those components together? That is where institutional capital meets institutional government knowledge. That is where institutional to institutional partnerships become essential. And that is where assets become infrastructure solutions. I'm Theo, also known as Derek Green, former federal procurement executive and contracting official, Army veteran, founder of Sky Acquisitions, and host of GovCon Empire. If your organization controls capital, real estate, or institutional level resources and wants to explore government-aligned commercial real estate opportunities at the infrastructural level, contact us for a strategic consultation. Welcome to GovCon Empire. Derek.green@skyprojectmanagement.com. You can also go to skyprojectmanagement.com and look at our options. I'm here whenever you need me. Talk soon.